What's going on, everybody? Hey, thanks for jumping on for today's episode. Today we're going to be joined by Caleb Adams. Caleb is a good friend of Flatirons Young Adults here on the FYA podcast. He's got an amazing story. We are so excited for you to hear it and learn and glean from it. Let's go ahead and jump right in.
Caleb, what's up, man?
How's it going, Christian?
Good, man. Thanks for being here. We're super excited to have you on, man. And, I heard your story a little bit ago. Man, it's powerful. There's so many elements that I'm so excited for you to get to share on this podcast, on this platform. You are the inaugural young adult to share their story on the FYA, the Flatirons Young Adults podcast, man. So that's pretty honorable. But before we get into kind of just the more details of your story, let's just take some time, get to know you. Sure. Where are you from originally? What do you do for work? All that stuff.
So I grew up in Virginia, Northern Virginia near DC. Moved here about a year and a half ago. I came to Colorado a lot growing up with my dad. We would go skiing in Vail and Keystone. And then really like one summer, we typically went to the beach and we decided to go to Colorado one summer. And that was when I really knew Colorado was my home.
Where you want to be.
Because I was just the summer was beautiful. And then I obviously knew I was well acquainted with the winter. And it took me a while to get here, but I moved here about a year and a half ago. And,
nice.
Love it here.
It's awesome, man. Yeah. Colorado's a tough place to be. You and the rest of the country figured out this is the place to be. So
I'm the reason the housing market's crazy. So.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Hey, man, we're hoping it. I don't know. We'll see what happens there. I'm not versed enough to talk about that. But so what do you do for work?
So I'm a software engineer.
Nice.
That was a very COVID-friendly career choice.
Absolutely.
That I did not expect. But I've been working for the same place for 8 years now. And they were supportive of me coming out here, which was really nice.
So you work remote?
Yeah,
awesome.
I work fully remote. It's a great job. It's been steady. A lot of my coworkers are like family, and
that's great, man.
I've seen them for many years now. So.
Stability, dude. I mean, that's something to say. Having a job for 8 straight years, I don't know about you. I feel like especially millennials, young adults, especially the 20 to 30s range, that's pretty rare to find something you're with for 8 years, man.
And people find out, they're always like, really? So I take a little bit of pride in it, I guess.
Quality employee, dude. I love it. Where'd you go to college at?
Liberty University.
That's right. Go Flames, baby.
Yep.
Malik Willis. He's looking good. Folks who don't know, Malik Willis, quarterback, out of Liberty. He's looking fantastic. I'm a big fan. That's awesome, man. And you are also, I remember you saying you're part of a Jeep club.
I am.
All right. So what is a Jeep club? How does one become a part of a Jeep club, and what do you do in a Jeep club?
It's a really interesting question. I didn't really off-road at all growing up. And one day I was introduced to a Jeep and I fell in love. The day before I moved to Colorado, I bought a Jeep, threw a U-Haul on it, towed it across the country with my dad. And I always kind of expected that there was a community out here, but I didn't know what that looked like.
Yeah.
And so one of the only people I met or knew in Colorado beforehand actually introduced me to a Christian guy who runs this Jeep club. So it's a group of other Jeepers. They have,
You guys have little Jesus fish on all the back of the Jeeps?
Maybe.
I love it, dude. That's awesome.
We do. I mean, it's a really good community. They pray beforehand.
That's cool.
Not everybody's a Christian. And it's just a really great way to get out in nature.
Yeah.
And just,
you guys go clear-off-roading stuff? Yeah, okay. So it's not just driving through. It's you guys are getting after it. Okay.
Yeah, we've done some famous trails, like Black Bear Pass is probably the most famous one. There's YouTube videos of people rolling. That's one of the trails I will never do again. It's
Are you close to rolling?
Closer than I would like.
Oh, dang.
So it's a good time though.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I met my mentor through that Jeep group and
the Jeep club, dude. I had a Jeep. It was actually my dad's old beat up Jeep he gave me in high school, and I ran that thing into the ground. So I would have been awful on Black Bear Pass?
Yeah,
Black Bear Pass. Dude, I remember that. That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for just letting us get to know you a little bit. Yeah. Again, I love your story. From what I remember you telling me, you kind of grew up in faith was around when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of a foundation there that was established for you. growing up. It was never really something that maybe you really 100% clicked with fully, but there was a point in your life where that became more real for you. And where I really, really want to start asking you some questions and really start picking up your story is in college. So you're at Liberty University, you're a Flame.
Yep.
You loved it there?
Yeah, I absolutely love my
That's
time
great,
there.
man. Isn't that the same Lynchburg? Isn't that where they Jack Daniels is distilled too?
Maybe in downtown.
Don't quote me on that. We might.
Right.
I don't know if that's actually true, but so you're in college. Just kind of walk us through what was going on in Caleb's life in college.
Sure.
What was going on around that time, and we can just kind of go from there.
Sure. I actually got introduced to Liberty from my sister. She moved from University of Mary Washington to Liberty when she was, I think, a sophomore.
Nice.
And that was when I really it caught my eye. So when I went, I kind of knew what to expect because I had been around it a little bit with my sister and really seen some life change in her. And yeah, so I started, fresh start. I had gone to public school growing up, so it was very different for me to be around other Christians in such a huge setting. I mean, there's like 12,000 students at the time. So I jumped right in. I'm typically a pretty introverted person,
Sure.
but I came out of my shell quite a bit in college. I grew up in a fairly small church, like 80 people. And I had always been intrigued by going overseas, but my church never really had any sort of resources to do that. And I knew Liberty had all kinds of opportunities. Oh, yeah. And so not long after I got there, I, started looking into, different trips that they offered. One was during spring break in my freshman year in Thailand. And so I prayed about it. I had a mentor in my life at the time. They have essentially like a small group structure at Liberty. And I had a prayer leader who was essentially my leader, my mentor. And he really encouraged me to sign up. And so I did. I guess a funny tidbit about that trip was it was 28 girls and 2 guys.
Nice.
And the 2 guys
love the ratio.
Were Caleb and Joshua, so we got a good kick out of the biblical pun or irony of that.
Oh man, I would have been in heaven.
Yeah.
So the pun side of it, to make that clear, I love puns. I wasn't making any other comment.
Yeah. So in order to prepare for that trip, I didn't really have a lot of friends that had ever been overseas. And so I met a girl and she had been to Uganda and Guatemala. And so I really leaned on her to kind of help me prepare mentally, spiritually, physically.
And she was from the United States originally, though?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she grew up in Ohio, went to Liberty. We were freshmen. We were both freshmen. Yeah. We actually met on Facebook, which was ironic. So we ended up just kind of becoming really good friends as she helped me prepare. She didn't go on the trip, but she did help me fundraise, make bracelets. She helped me a lot. We grew really close. And between the fall and spring semester, we ended up dating. And so my life kind of it started to change quite a bit when I was at Liberty. I didn't really date.
And how old were you at this time when you started dating?
18.
Okay.
So still pretty young. And so we started dating. I went on the trip. It was an experience of a lifetime. I absolutely loved my time there. I actually stayed in contact with 2 of the missionaries from there.
So cool.
Ended up going on a trip later on in 2014 to revisit them and do some more personal work with not such a huge group.
Yeah.
And it was
not 28 girls, 2 guys.
Yeah. No, it was a really great experience. And so I met this girl. We dated all throughout college, and we got engaged. We both finished school in 3 years, which.
Why you're an engineer, man? I knew you were smart. I knew it.
But we got engaged before our final year, and then got married. Actually, ended up getting married a couple months after we graduated.
So all that happened in about the course of 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a blessing from God at the time. I was very thankful. And that's just kind of a little bit about, my time at Liberty.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeah, so like just being a fresh graduate of college, stepping into life. I was a software engineer, moved to Alexandria, Virginia, so my hometown, essentially just a few miles away, and really just started to build my life. And so we were married. We continued our marriage for several years. It was never a bad marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It was also not always great. And back in 2019, I ended up finding out unexpectedly that my ex-wife, had stepped outside of our marriage and got involved with somebody that she had been involved with overseas, kind of behind my back, and that that totally rocked my world.
Yeah.
I was.
You guys been married how long at this time?
3 or 4 years.
Okay. Wow.
It really kind of it just helped me identify a lot of my identity issues. Because basically the rug was pulled out from under me. I was unsuspecting.
Oh yeah, man.
Total life change for me, and it was really hard. And I almost walked away from my faith because I was
because in that dynamic, was it one of those things for you where it was like, God, why would you let this happen?
I was angry at God. I was confused. I was broken. I felt like I was a good husband. I had done, a lot right.
Yeah.
And yet I was left with my life kind of in shambles.
Yeah. You did everything right and everything wrong happened.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I wasn't perfect, but it definitely rocked my world. And, so that was really challenging. I had some moments where I almost walked away from my faith. I struggled with depression. I would, I could remember, sometimes just sitting in a dark, cold bathroom floor and just sobbing. So it was a hard time in my life.
Yeah, that's real. Wow. So all that kind of goes down. You're in a place where you're, you're hitting the low.
Right.
What happens after that? What do you do?
So I stopped going to church. I wish my story ended there.
Sure.
And that it got better, but it didn't. So about 6 months into my separation, basically my ex-wife walked out and never really looked back. Packed her stuff, and that was it. And I got really lonely. And I poured myself into my job and my work because I was trying to, searching for my identity, and I wasn't looking for God.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting involved with a coworker. And at the time I would have told you, and even, to this day, I would tell you, I would never wish what happened to me upon my worst enemy.
Sure.
And yet I made it happen. I reached my absolute rock bottom that I hope I never reach again. So I got involved with another coworker who was also married. And it was very short-lived, but it was full of evil and deceit, and I'm not proud of it. And God's been really good to me because I did not deserve to come out of that.
Yeah.
Okay. And
sure.
So yeah, it was about 2 months, and I really...
Saying that relationship was about 2 months? Okay.
I got to a point where I couldn't... one thing about me is I'm not a good liar. And
it's probably a really good quality, yeah.
So I just eventually ended up just totally confessing to my family.
Wow. This is like parents and sister.
Yeah,
okay.
Everyone in my life that was close and that I trusted.
Yeah.
And there was power in that. I wasn't okay, but it helped me move take a step in the right direction.
Absolutely, man.
And
what was that like for you? I'm curious, like, did you kind of come to a moment when you said, hey, I should get this off my chest? Was it one of those things where it was weighing so heavily on you that you were like, hey, I need to seek some relief from this. Like, I got to get this out.
I would spend, I would sleep. I would be lucky if I would sleep 1 or 2 hours a night. And just like the pure, physical burnout was a lot. And then like I couldn't focus on my job. I couldn't pour my life into my passions. You know, I love music and off-roading and, you know, all these different things. And I was so consumed by guilt and shame that I couldn't live.
Wow, man.
And yeah, it was really challenging. But
so you tell your family, say, hey, this is what's going on. What happens after that?
I really just had a lot of truth spoken into my life that like it didn't change my worth, and that my story wasn't over. I did not believe it at the time.
Sure.
I'm looking back, I definitely believe it.
It's so hard to see that in the moment, right? When you're in the middle of something, and no matter what, well-intended people, Christians, whatever, they tell you something, and it's like, you can say that's true for everybody else, but it's so hard to look yourself in the mirror and actually believe it. That's real, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was, whether it was family, you know, my sister, people close in my life that I trusted. And it helped me come out of it slowly. I still wasn't going to church. I had this desire that, I just needed to get out of where I was. And I know it's cliche, but like the change in geography was really important to me.
Change of scenery for sure.
And so back in November of 2020, so this was about 6 months after the affair had ended, I planned a trip with my dad to Colorado with the intent of finding a place to potentially move to. And so we explored. We went from Colorado Springs to Vail to Broomfield, which is where I live now.
Nice.
And yeah, that's kind of how
that all played out.
Yeah,
so that's awesome, man. Thank you. I mean, just for being real and sharing that, man. And I think we've all had those moments. I think you mentioned the kind of those like bathroom floor moments, you know, where it's just everything feels dark and you feel dark. And man, I really appreciate you being open and vulnerable to that. But like you said, I mean, people were speaking to you that your story wasn't done.
Right.
So you come to Colorado, you see this with your dad. Obviously there was a passion to live here. Yeah. What kind of happened since coming to Colorado? You're here with Colorado with your dad, and God shows up and does something. Like in your own words, how do you describe where the story picks up from there?
So I was not set on Colorado at the time when I visited. I owned a townhome in Virginia, and you know I had a stable job. I wasn't sure if my job would kind of support me going out here, and I didn't want to move across the country in a pandemic and also find a new job. But when I came back from Colorado, I kind of had the kick in the butt that I needed to just make the decision. I had my basement flooded, and I was done with home ownership at the time. And so when I came home, I wasn't sure, but after that happened, I was like, all right, I'm ready. I'm ready to move.
It's a sobering reality of adulthood right there.
Adulting. So I ended up, getting a lease in April of 2021
out here in Colorado.
And, I made the move. I knew no one coming out here except one person. Two people, Mike and Kathy Taylor, just incredible people. They live in Erie. And my family had met them when they were my age, through, a similar, small group, but for married couples. And I just want to take a second and just express how incredible it is that like God was orchestrating my life well before I was born. And like the Bible talks about that, but like it's true.
Now looking back, you can see it.
And it was incredible because like the first day, it was a Sunday, I was here. I moved to Broomfield and we went to dinner at Hops and Drops, which is right up the street from my place. I love that place.
Great spot.
A lot of good memories.
Shameless
there.
Plug for Hops and Drops. We're not sponsored, but shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
That's
for
right.
Sure. And he saw I drove a Jeep. So
this is where the Jeep Club started. Okay.
And he goes, hey, I know, this Christian guy that runs a Jeep group, and they, do all sorts of trail runs in the summer. And so like summer was coming, and it was like an answered prayer. And then he gave me a list of 5 churches to try. And at the time, I was still in I would say a pretty spiritually dead part of my life. But that was just like a drop that I needed at the time, and a push in the right direction from somebody.
What made you want to, was there something in that season that made you really want to reconsider church?
Just like I saw the culture in Colorado. Like a lot of Coloradans ironically will say that like people aren't friendly here. I grew up in DC where people walk on the sidewalk and they look down instead of looking you in the eye. And so just like I sensed community here that I didn't have before. And I wanted to surround myself with people that were, my age.
Yeah, absolutely.
And walking through similar things.
Yeah.
And so, that one of the churches on the list was Flatirons. And it took me a while to get here. But the first Sunday I came here, they played Enter Sandman.
Come on now. F yeah. Come on.
And I just, it stuck with me. The church I grew up in, I played guitar. We played all sorts of, pop music, rock music, everyththing.
You ever heard a Metallica song in church before that?
Maybe.
Okay,
we might have actually played
the first one. Nice.
So it stuck with me. It resonated with me. And then I was already hooked. And then they got off the stage, and I don't remember who got up on stage. It might have been you. And they y'all made an announcement that you guys were relaunching the young adult ministry in the fall.
Sure.
And it was just like, it was a huge answer to prayer. Not just my prayer. I know my family, especially my mom, was praying a lot about it. And so, that's kind of just how, I got to young adults.
That's awesome. And so you hear about young adults, you wanted to get involved. Since that time, I mean, I know you're part of an amazing group, and that group's had a huge impact on your life. How have you seen kind of since that moment? You mentioned, you saw God before you were even aware of it. He was orchestrating all of these pieces of your life where he's a million steps ahead of you, and you had no idea, but he was already kind of bringing together this plan of redemption. Since your time being involved with Flatirons and with young adults in that group, how have you experienced some of God's redemption from maybe that bathroom floor moment, that rock bottom moments of your life where you couldn't sleep to where you're at now? How have you seen God work in that community and in this place in your life?
It's a really great question. It's just, for me, like, I had given up on myself and God had not. And I know like a lot of people my age who have been there or are there. And that's a really tough place to be. And yet just take a risk. Like that was for me, like I took the risk of like meeting strangers and
just saying yes.
Yeah. And now I've been surrounded by brothers, sisters, people who love me. Just like being able to be vulnerable, like, shortly after I ended up joining my small group, they gave me the opportunity to share my testimony, much like I am right now. Yeah. And there's power in that. Because when you do that, people meet you where you're at. And that's been very true in my life. And there's healing in it because you'll find out that when you start to share your story, people will be like, hey, that resonates with me.
We're not all that different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's just been little, just the consistency of the group and being able to show up, be myself, not have to pretend like everything is okay. The thing that really stuck out about the group I'm in with Kyle and Davis Clark was their...
Shout out Kyle and Davis, great dudes.
Incredible dudes. Their description on the online sign up was, it's okay to not be okay. So that was kind of something that stuck out to me at the time. And then the other part that got me hooked was I was really, this is kind of a sidebar, I was like not set on driving to Denver because I live in Broomfield.
Sure, especially now. Yeah, the commute, that's tough. Yeah.
And so I was like looking at Westminster and other places close by, and none of them worked. They were all like, I had another men's group on Thursday nights. And so I messaged my mom, and I was like, I love my mom. I messaged her and I was like, I need help because I'm very indecisive. I was like, find a group and pick it for me.
Yeah.
And Kyle and Davis's had stuck out to me, but I never told her that, and I wasn't sold on it. So she comes back to me 24 hours later and she had read the descriptions. And another part in their description was that Kyle and Davis both sleep on top of their comforters and use a blanket so they don't have to make their bed. And my mother knows that I do the exact same thing.
That is awesome.
And so she's like, that's the group you need to join.
Dude, shout out moms, man.
Yeah.
They know us well. Shout out good moms out
And
there.
so she was right.
That's funny, man.
And
You still sleep that way?
yep,
I have to try it, man.
it saves a lot of time.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I showed up. I experienced healing from the day one that I showed up. I walked in the door. I remember seeing Davis's big smile and his laugh. He has the best laugh.
He's got one of the greatest laughs ever.
And
oh yeah.
I just immediately was welcome. I was like, it was at home. And there was just, I have lifelong friends that I've developed from that. Whether they're adventure buddies to go jeeping with me, or I met my now girlfriend, Emily, at group. And
wow, man.
so there's been healing in every aspect of my life, whether it's my broken marriage, my fear of vulnerability or community, my sin, being able to just be Caleb and not be judged or ostracized for the mistakes I've made.
Yeah. I mean, man, the fact that you even mentioned you had a fear of vulnerability and you're doing this now, I mean, that should speak for itself, because it's like, your story's powerful, from these moments of, hey, you hit rock bottom. And I think sometimes rock bottom can be the most gracious place that God gives us, because it gives us a place to quit falling.
Right.
It gives us a place to hit and turn around and look up. Right. And to your credit, you turned around and you looked up. Even when you weren't even realizing you were looking for God, you turned around and looked up, and God was right there the entire time. And I think it's so powerful, man. And one more thing I want to touch on with you is, you kind of mentioned from an identity standpoint, you kind of talked about how these things in your life, like your quality of life was improving. You started experiencing forgiveness and healing. But you mentioned within your own identity that, like, we talked about earlier, you couldn't even really look yourself in the mirror. Right. And it sounded like there was a real sense of, you didn't like yourself, you didn't love yourself, you were lost in your identity and trying to get something. How have you seen God restore that piece of giving you an identity, affirming who you really are, and building you up in that? How's that looked for you?
It's been a journey. I shared, how getting the rug ripped out from underneath me really just, it was like a smack in the face. And how even Jim was talking about how, futile things are like that. If you put your hope in your marriage, and that's what your hope's in, God will take it away.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me. And it can happen in other ways. And it wasn't a perfect journey either, because I moved to Colorado and I started to experience this healing, and I still wasn't putting my hope in Jesus. I started to put it in adventure and outdoors and snowboarding. And so one of the big parts of my story that really kind of helped me form my identity and remind me of how futile even good things in life are, like snowboarding, is I broke my back 6 months ago, and basically, I had surgery, and I have this metaphor for kind of what my identity had looked like, which it was like a Jenga tower. And all it took was, pulling one piece out, and everything came crashing down. And God really used that to basically take the rubble of my life and say, no, this is who you are to me. This is what Caleb means. I really believe in the power of names. And my name in Hebrew means dog-like faithfulness. And when I, divorced my ex-wife, when I had an affair, when I was at my total rock bottom, I did not believe that I was a faithful person. And Jesus was like, nope, actually, that's not who you are.
I say something different about you, and I see something in you you don't see in yourself. Yeah.
And it's slow. It's been slow, but he's rebuilt that foundation to where, like, it allows me to operate out of my job, out of my daily life, my interactions with people, that, like, I'm a good creation. And I am very flawed, but there is beauty in brokenness. And I don't know what the Japanese practice is called, but there's a pottery practice that they have where they intentionally smash pottery.
Oh, I've heard of this. I don't know.
And then they fuse it back together with gold. And Emily was actually the one who had told me about it, and really just reminded me. It was like a beautiful picture for me of what God has done in my life.
Wow.
And there's been, just tremendous healing in that, reminders of who I am.
Yeah. I love what you said, man. It's like God almost has to break you down to build you back up into to something new. But when he breaks you down, it feels really painful. Yeah. It was actually one of the most loving things he could have done, because he was building you back up on a foundation that could actually last.
Right.
And in the middle of those cracks, like you said, with that pottery practice, like you see his gold in the middle of it, like just a beautiful story of humanity and God's work in your life, man. That's so powerful. And to kind of close us out here, for anyone listening, any young adult listening, anybody listening at all, from what you've learned, if you had to say one or two things based on what you've learned to young adults in the state of Colorado, across the country, what would you say?
I would say you may have given up on yourself, but God knows that, and he will put people in your life, and like, you got to be willing to take the risk. It's scary. I've been there. I did not want to go to small group. But the moment I walked in the door, God was like, I'm going to honor that step of faith, and I'm going to bring healing to your life.
Wow.
And so, the gist of that is take the risk. Especially for introverted people like me. That feels super risky. For somebody who's extroverted, that may not be what you need to hear. For somebody who's extroverted, it's like, I would say, kind of what I said before, that there's power in vulnerability. That if you are willing to share your story and like not leave stuff out, like there's stuff in my story that I wish I could leave out, but I know that God can use it, that there's healing in confession, and that when doing that in a small circle of people who are at the same age and going through similar or very different things, they need that healing too, just as much as you do. There's just tap into that power. That would be,
it's amazing, man.
My suggestion.
Perfect. Caleb, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Thanks, Christian. It's been an honor.
That was awesome, man. I got to say F yeah to that one. That was great, man. Thanks so much. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in to the Flatirons Young Adults podcast. If you have not already done so, please subscribe to this podcast so you can get notifications about when our new episodes are dropping. If you don't follow us on social media, follow us on social media at FlatironsYA. You can stay up to date with all of our live gatherings if you're in the Colorado area, our upcoming socials that we have once a month where we just get together and hang out and form community with one another. And at the end of the day, do not forget to share this with a friend if it has affected or touched your life. We will see you next time on the F Yeah podcast.